When you think of some of the most powerful Marvel characters, some of you might think of Hulk, Professor X, or Magneto. Others might think of characters like Captain Universe, Spider-Man, and Franklin Richards. And even some other people might say Dr. Michael Morbius. Shout out to the Morbhead viewers. But one character whose power level is almost always overlooked is none other than Madam Web. And it's not just because her web connects us all, even though it does. Now I know, the Madam Web movie just came out and you're probably thinking that I'm trying to hop on the bandwagon of that sweet Sony cash, right? But I can promise you, I'm not. I was actually reading this comic book that featured Madam Web, and she was able to pull Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099, from his dimension timeline into her own. And she was doing it just to have a little chat with the guy, you know? At first I thought, oh, this is just a harmless way to get the characters to interact, you know, it's pretty easy. But then I started to think about it and I realized that this has major repercussions. And when I thought of that, I started to think of some of the other Madam Web feats and I was like, wait a second. This Madam Web lady is pretty powerful. Madam Web might actually be crazy underrated. So, just for context, the original Madam Web was Cassandra Webb, and she was a blind, paralyzed, telepathic precog. And clairvoyant. Could not remember the last word. So, paralyzed, blind, telepathic, clairvoyant precog. She was able to use these gifts to start a business where she was a professional medium, and this is actually where she met Spider-Man. You see, Spider-Man was trying to hunt down this newspaper publisher who'd been abducted, and the trail led to none other than this medium who he barged into her apartment and found Madam Web. Since he was already there with Madam Web, Spider-Man asked Madam Web for help, and Madam Web, to Spidey's surprise, used her powers to actually track down this newspaper publisher for him. Not only that, but Madam Web also told Spider-Man, hey, I know your secret identity. This alone was already a pretty fun and unique power set that was added to the Spider-Man mythos. You know, Peter, a man of science, having to deal with this new era of magic, but not quite like the Inheritors or Spider Totems, just, you know, a blind, paraplegic, clairvoyant precog, right? Telepath as well. But as time goes on, Spider-Man continues to team up with Madam Web, and Madam Web continues to prove her worth. I mean, Madam Web even eventually gets a role training various Spider-Women. However, Cassandra Webb's time as Madam Web soon comes to an end when she gets her throat cut by Kraven the Hunter's daughter. And with her throat cut dying, Madam Web somehow takes the time to reveal to one of the Spider-Women she trained, Julia Carpenter, that not only is Madam Web no longer blind, but she also has the ability to transfer her powers to someone else permanently. So she chose to pass on her Madam Web abilities to Julia Carpenter. And then she died. Now, when Julia becomes Madam Web, we start to see that Cassandra Webb was kind of holding back when she had the powers of Madam Web. Like, really holding back. We see Julia as Madam Web accomplishing so many different things. Not only does she have telekinesis, psychic abilities, but she's able to tap into other spider people, tap into the web of life and destiny, which we're not really going to delve into, and see the future like the other Madam Web was able to do. Her abilities are so honed that she's even able to finish Shang-Chi's sentences. Really weird, but you know, she's done it. And she's so powerful that not only can she look into the past, but she can actually look at you and see every single life possibility, every choice you might make, and what are the most likely paths. Imagine someone looking at you and knowing every single possibility, every single outcome that could ever happen. And it doesn't even stop there. Despite Madam Web being blind, which I guess, I'm not 100% sure, I guess she passed on her blindness to Julia Carpenter, even though she wasn't blind when she died. Someone can leave a comment and correct me on how exactly Julia Carpenter became blind as well. But despite being blind, she's actually able to see the world around her perfectly, kind of like Daredevil, but she's also able to see invisible people because of the way that light bends around them and how sound waves interact with their invisible bodies. She can also astral project, kind of like Doctor Strange, but not exactly. She can actually send her astral projection into any timeline, dimension, alternate universe, wherever. And keep in mind, she's not even the Sorcerer Supreme. But most importantly, like I said at the start of this video, she can bring anyone from anywhere to her universe. It doesn't matter how weak or how powerful they are. If she has enough energy, she can bring anyone to her universe, to her location at that moment. And it's not even like she's opening a dimensional portal and they can step through, or she's opening it right next to them and they can just like choose to come through or not. No, she can do that too, yes, but when I say Madame Web can snatch someone up and bring them to her dimension, I mean against their will. She can drag Galactus against his will to their dimension at that moment to sit right next to her. Which is just absolutely stupidly overpowered. I mean, dragging someone of any power level against their will to your location is just insane. And she's also able to send these people back whenever she wants. Madame Web could have just sent Thanos to a totally different universe. I just don't get how crazy powerful she is. Plus, on top of all of this, Julia Carpenter, the Madame Web, like I said, was a Spider-Woman previously. She retained all her Spider-Person powers. Increased strength, increased durability, increased agility, increased healing factor, and even her psionic webbing. She had this unique kind of webbing as Spider-Woman, but we're not getting into that. This is about Madame Web. And with more and more appearances of Madame Web, especially with the Spider-Verse events that go on in the comics nearly constantly, we're constantly seeing more and more little powers of Madame Web's popping up here and there, which means she's just constantly getting more and more powerful. I mean, who would have expected this amount of power when you saw that frail old woman in a chair for the first time? Plus, did I mention she's technically a mutant? So yeah, although Madame Web might seem like a geriatric old woman or just some lady with psychic powers, she might actually be one of the most overlooked and overpowered characters in all of Marvel Comics. In all of comics in general. But what do you think? How does Madame Web rank among Marvel's most powerful? Thanks for watching.